Hey everybody, welcome to Woodworking Wisdom. My name's Colwin.
And I'm Nick Agar.
Today we're going to have a go at a chalice. I will get caught out several times there because I keep calling it a goblet. So this is going to be a chalice. We're going to use this as a dual project, so we're going to collaborate on this one. I'm going to do as much of the turning as possible. Nick is going to do all the embellishment. I won't break the surprise too much at the moment, but Nick's going to guide me through the sort of shape that he wants for him to embellish.
Basically we're going to make up as we go along, but a chalice is normally an extravagant goblet, so if we do say goblet by mistake once in a while, I'm sure we'll be forgiven. So yeah, if you Google chalice you'll see what we mean. But let's get into it. We've got some soft maple on the lathe on this lovely robust American beauty, and we are here at Arrowmont in Tennessee doing part of a 2-week class with our wonderful turning smocks, as you can see, with our wood turning adventure, part of a 7,000-mile road trip, which you're now part of. So we're going to be taking each other to press the buttons on the camera, so wish us luck, and hope you enjoy it. I'll be back in a moment.
Well, whilst I'm here, I want to just quickly thank Axminster for supplying the smocks and for giving us continued support throughout this lovely trip. I'm going to get Nick to help me in a minute because I'm going to start reeling out all the other supporters and sponsors of our trip. One of them is Crown, and I'm using mainly Crown tools here. Certainly my SKUs have had a very, very good run out for the first 3 or 4 weeks. But Nick, give me a hand here. So we've got Pizza Ranch, we've got Robust Lathes, of course, here.
We've got Chroma Craft, of course we've got Chroma Craft, and we're applying some Chroma Craft products to our work. Not forgetting where, of course, in the US you can buy a lot of these products with wonderful Packard Woodworks, and then you can pick up your tools, and Tormek for sharpening example. Of course we can't stay sharp without Tormek on this journey. We need to sharpen our crown tools on the Tormek. And Canaveras tools for a lot of the carving components we're going to be using, and of course not forgetting the wood turning cruise, and the next one is going to be in 2023 starting from Stavanger on the 19th of August, so we can't wait to be on that.
This time next year we'll be on there.
This time next year, here we go again. We're a bit spoiled really sometimes, aren't we? Okay, I think we've covered that one.
This funny old hobby of wood turning, eh? Right then, let's start. So we're going to rough down first. We've got a roughing gouge here. This one is a little bit bigger than I'm used to. If you've seen a lot of my streams before, I generally start with a 3/4. This one is about, I would say, an inch, if not a little bit bigger than that. And I'm starting at 0 or slowest on this lathe setting, turn the machine on, and then up to about 14 to 1500. So we're literally just going to rough down to a cylinder first, or a near cylinder. Going to cut the foot in, then hold it in the chuck. So we're going to use the SK114 C-jaws, and then we can do all the shaping from there on. So down the cylinder. Just taking a little bit more from this surface. This is going to be a goblet top. I want to give the base a little bit more size compared to the goblet. So once we've done that, we go in with a parting tool. I've already set my calipers to a specific size to fit the C-jaws. So we're straight in. This is a 1/8 parting tool. And I've got about a quarter inch turning all together. I want to make sure every surface that we contact is clean, so I'm just going to very slightly undercut the very bottom. Check your turn and make sure everything is crisp. If not, then go back in with a skew. Tidy up any of those areas that you think may not be absolutely crisp. Stop the lathe, have a double check. That looks cool. So what we've got, this is down the pure round. This has a few flats in this area, so we're pretty much there where I want to be. That can come off for the moment. I'm just going to move the tailstock back because we need to remove our centre fit the chuck, which is already set up with the sigils. Incidentally, the sensor we'll be using on there was the large of the Pro drive, so it's just a really nice drive, nice and solid to rough out that section. Okay, so sigils are fitted, like I say. Just pinch up to start with. Going to use the tailstock just to make sure everything's centered nicely. And I'm using a ring tailstock center here. Yeah, that's fitting quite well. So pinch up properly and then do your final tighten of your chuck. And we're only going to work, to start with, we're going to work on the chalice top. So I'm just going to grab Nick briefly just to show me where. I'm reckoning, Nick, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking around about that position for the top of the goblet.
Maybe a little low, but a great place to enter there, Colwin. We've got to leave ourselves, as you will know, some spare, a bit of waste material where we pared off the piece.
Yeah.
So looking at this, it's a 9.5 inch, in American language, piece of by 3 inch thick maple. So using the rule of thirds, just eyeball it. And I think I'd go with my gut as you do when you're measuring until you have to measure something.
Yeah.
So we're going to make the cup a little bit less in diameter because the chalice pretty much always, as far as I've seen, has a much bigger base to it. And it's just more expressed by the base. Like I said, it's an exaggerated, over-decorated kind of cup. So I will shrink this down a little bit so that at least our form here is a little bigger. And of course, if you want to add a larger foot to that, then you could do something similar to if you've made a kitchen paper towel holder where you've attached a base to a tool spindle. Then of course you can attach that. Grain direction is going to be different because it will be like a small bowl blank, maybe 2 inch thick or something like that, to the base, and then exaggerate the form longer. But we have to consider grain direction then and how we decorate it. That'll become apparent as we go through the piece. But basically, Colwin, I think that's perfect. Slightly smaller cup gives us a chance to have a slightly bigger foot. And we're not going to have a tall, slim goblet like a sort of wine glass. We're going to have one that kind of expresses outwards with maybe an exaggerated bead or ball or whatever you come up with below the cup.
Okay, okay.
Think kind of medieval.
Right, I gotcha. Okay, no problem. In that case, let's start. We'll start with my 55 degree bevel angle on this one. Half inch bowl gouge. And we're going to hollow out afterwards, so I'm going to wait until we've got the decorating done before I do any hollowing. So just removing some waste stock first, just so we can get the shape around. And we're going to come smaller in the goblet, remember, or in the cup end of this chalice. So let's just clean up a little.
Love that shear cutting motion, it's such a nice thing. You've already got the gouge in your hand, and it all just comes together, and it's such a useful tool, and that fingernail grind just works so well. The stability of the bowl gouge going over the tool rest there, as you can see, as Colwin cleans up the top and utilises that revolving centre to support the length of this piece, just at least to take some of that material out. It also means that the top edge of the cup is going to be clean. You can hear how nice that is, that lovely angel haircut, you might call it.
And I don't want to take this down too small, we've still got to hollow out. So yeah, I'm going to take a little bit more away, but not too much. So then we can start coming around with our goblet shape. Sorry, our chalice shape. I think that's about...
I'm going to stop you there a minute.
Yeah, go for it.
Jump in here. Before we go too much more on that part,
Yeah.
we're going to have a decorative band. It's going to be quite a proportion of that cup.
Okay.
Rather than doing the whole thing, which given the time we have.
Yeah.
So rather than just a small one, I'm going to go with something that again is about 2/3 covering that cup.
Okay.
So before you shape any more of that, in fact, if I've got a pencil here, do you mind if I just draw
You go
a line on there?
Yeah. That makes my life
Something
easier.
like, I'm just eyeballing what I said, something like that would be a nice proportion.
Okay.
All right, so we jump in.
All right. We'll give that a nice hard edge. We'll put a skew underneath it or something just to give us a nice little shadow line.
Yeah, perfect. So as if that ring has been slid on or fixed onto the goblet, that's the sort of look we want to go for.
There we go. Perfect. Okay. No, we're just going to take a little skew just to refine that bottom one. I can't quite get in there with the bevel of the gouge, so just touching that bottom edge and maybe get the tip under there, just really to refine that edge. I'm just going to tickle the corners, just so we've got the harshness away. We're going to sand a little bit, but have a look at that, mate. What do you reckon?
Perfect, looks the business. And I was going to say about your skews, and this is going to look like an advert for them, but I thought, what do you want with this little thing? And I keep looking up there because that's where the monitor is, my apologies. But when you get to use one, and I've had some of these in my school over here for a few weeks now, I was watching your hands then, and just the way you have so much contact over the tool, and it becomes almost like a pencil you can use on the lathe cutting the wood. It's just brilliant. I've got about 30 skews in my school, and I thought, do I really need any more? But I tell you what, you fall in love with them when you use them, and the students have this week too, haven't they? That sounds like a big old advert, doesn't it? But it really is. I was just watching your hands there thinking, yeah, that's why. Yeah. You're not back here afraid of it. It just becomes that such a useful thing. So
a lot of the guys that are the regulars to this will have heard me harp on about them all the time, but that's my sort of mission, is to get these things in people's hands. Everybody makes the best tool, everybody owns the best tool, but when you pick up a skew like this, it's so different to the standard skew chisels that you can get out there, and it just makes you refine your cut a little bit. You feel everything all of a sudden.
It's just comfortable, it's friendly.
Yeah.
It really is. Well, that looks perfect.
Thanks for that little plug.
That's all right. That was a big plug, wasn't it? But it's the truth. It really is. Well, why I think people aren't stupid. They know when we're talking about it. So that's fine. We'll just sand that guy there, and
clean this up a little.
Before we finish that too much, because Agar's bound to get a bit of paint or something somewhere. So we certainly need to sand this part ready for me to embellish.
Yeah.
But we'll come back and we'll finish those in a minute. Of course, I understand I like to work tidily, take any fluff out of the way when you're looking at a design. I'll be ready with some.
It's good for the eye.
Good on the eye.
What do you want? Should I just sand down to about 180?
I'm going to go 240, no more than 400. There's a bit of 240, we can start there. No more than 400. I want to have an even application of colour on this, so I don't want it too shiny. And of course, we don't want to oversand. The dust extractor in here is so loud and noisy, nobody will be able to hear a stink. So. Yeah. Just a minimal this morning will be fine. There's a bit of
It's really effective. It's just that it's big and noisy. It's like any dust extractor.
Oh man, it is the size of a house outside.
If you didn't catch where we are, we're in Arrowmont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Having a blast. We're in the middle of our second week now. Some of the guys that are sat here watching us. And we've been doing some really great projects. We've been making things like these tiki masks behind us. We've been doing rocking bowls. We've been doing skew chisel practice pieces, German smokers. Remind me what else, little tiki idols.
And they're going to be doing the chalice after they've seen this.
And the chalice, yeah, this is their next project, of course. There we are, Nick. I think it's over to you.
Okay,
All right.
let's move on from
I'm going to grab my coffee.
Thank
Get out of
you.
your way.
Okay, so there are many ways we can embellish this. If you've got a pyrography unit or Dremels or other tools like that, I'm going to be using some rotary texturing tools and some wood dies and one little micro carving tool you may or may not have seen. I'm going to start off using the smaller of the crown spiraling tools. Both of these have a different pitch or a different cutter in them. And you might be able to see there, but you will when the result goes on the wood. So this one has a coarser pitch than the other one. They're both the same size. And I've taken the bar that fixes onto this the tube that fixes onto the bar. Here's a larger one that slides over the larger tools. And it has a flat on it which allows you to fix a position. So the tool rotates within that tube and can be fixed to repeat certain patterns. But I like to use them freehand. I'll show you on the larger one in a moment. Speed of this really not too fast, 400, 500 RPM is fine. Height of the tool rest pretty much so when you lay the tool flat on the tool rest, the cutter is on the centre line of rotation. And I tend to load these so that the nut that does them up is to the flat side or the back end, if you like, of the cutter. So when we approach the wood and pivot in, it's doing itself up rather than undoing, because this can actually drop on the floor into the shavings and disappear because it's not magnetic. The reason I'm looking up is not because I want you to see the underneath of my chin, it's so I can see that the Colwin's actually remembered to press the button for the camera into the right place. And he did. So we'll move forwards. And I'm just going to do this on the slow rotation. And I'm not actually going to put a mask on for this one. You can see very clearly what I'm doing. There's not much that could go wrong for me. Overhand grip, pivoting in from the top, and you can kind of hear it perv if it's a happy cut. I'm going to come below that with the other one, the same angle. Basically I'm trying to hit the top little triangles of those cutters. Now we're going to ramp it up to the larger of those cutters, and again make sure there's plenty of room so you don't snag it on the tool rest. I'm using one of Robust's new upright tool rests, which are great for shear cutters. If you haven't seen those yet, I'm sure they're pretty new. I'm sure they'll make it around the world sooner or later. So again, using the top part of the cutter, you can just see where they begin to shine on the top of that shape. And that leaves indentations. The amount of pressure you put on there is something that's going to take a little bit of practice. Now we're going to lean this one over a little further. Pretty much if upright was 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, this will give us a little bit more of a spiral pattern. I'm holding it still each time. I'm not moving it along. This would be part of when you were doing a spiral on the side of a piece where you would move it along that axis. Then you would of course use that tube to feed it through. Let's go back to the smallest version of these, which I've left the tube on, and I'm calling it a tube Colwin. What do you think you would call it? It's a device that locks it into a position. A collar? Collar sounds much nicer than tube, doesn't it? It's funny when you're on camera, certain words come out your mouth and I've no idea why. Alright, now we're getting there. So I think we're going to put another heavy design below that one, which will frame what we're going to come up with next. This one is more like, as we're in America, this is definitely the home of the cowboys, more like a cowboy spur. So this one has a double-sided bevel, if you like. We're going to put this one in upright. If you do turn this one on its side, it's very aggressive and can actually damage the grain, but it certainly leaves a texture. It's up to you. So you hear, press a little harder there to really punctuate that line. Now then, this is a micro handpiece. And on this micro handpiece, I've got something from the jewellery industry, which is a cup bar. It's a very tiny hollow cup. It's going to literally burn by friction as it's rotating very fast, around 26,000 RPM. So a good idea maybe to have a clean up, move all your dust away, turn any dust extraction off so that if there is a potential of a tiny ember coming off of that. And of course make sure, even if you're not wearing glasses, make sure you've got something protecting your eyes. So we'll wind this one up. And to start this one, you can always practice on your stock beside the piece. We're going to just lean in and give it a little bit of a wiggle, and you'll see the smoke appear. That leaves us a little ring. Now, the little lines left by that crown texturing tool actually have given me an index to go between, so I can hit one, miss one, hit one, miss one. Now you can judge the distance by eye if you like, and I sort of go along happily until I reach a point where I think, okay, it's going to match up or it's not. So before we get quite all the way around to the other side, we'll have a little peek, and we're just going to throw one in the middle there. And you can't look at it all from one angle, so even though there's a tiny discrepancy there, it really doesn't show. Now before we apply any dye to this, it's going to be important to take off any damaged or broken material on the surface. Going to pick up some of the shavings from the material we've been using, and I'm going to hold my hand underneath and attempt to support the opposite wrist with that hand and press on and remove any of those little fibres that may be sticking up. And as we're safely between centres, I can actually go into reverse and do the other way. Just be warned that you don't press too hard, because of course you're going to cause friction and things can get a little hot, and I don't want any of you getting a friction burn. Now, even without looking, you can see without touching it, I can tell that's a lot better, but I can feel just a couple of little hairs sticking up on there still. So I'm going to reach for my 400 grit and just go over that, just to take off any last little bits of fuzz, and the magic way of making the sandpaper disappear, as you just saw. Doesn't that happen all too often? A magic trick. Okay, so now I'm ready to apply my wood dye, and I'm going to be putting on Chroma Craft wood dye straight out of the bottle. It's a resinated wood dye, and we're going to be putting that through an airbrush. After that, we're going to put a clear dye sealer on it, which causes a nice sandwich between the dye and the Chroma Gilt, which is going to go on after that. And I know some of you have seen this, but we have to remind you this is not a wax. It's more of a permanent surface. So the lovely coloured waxes that are available are more for working into the open grain of wood rather than on the surface, because wax can of course wear off. It fits on your picture frame. How many times you pass your picture frame around? Not too many probably, but on other objects that are around the home, that even ornaments are going to be passed around and handled, it just does tend to wear down and dull off. Whereas the Chroma Gilt family is a permanent surface, but it's meant to go on the wood rather than into the grain and then be removed, which is what the waxes are best for. So they kind of each have their own good places. So let's get on with the airbrush. I'm just going to grab a double action airbrush here, which allows me to bring the paint on and off with a little bit more control. And of course being very careful where your hoses are coming from with any rotating objects. That can get exciting a little quickly. We're in a very well ventilated studio here, but of course your masks as well as your eye protection. All dust is bad for us. And we also want to make sure I get to the bottom of that nice detail that Colwin put on that edge for me. So that's now good to go. It's touch dry almost immediately. And I'm going to come on with the clear dye sealer. It will look like I'm barely spraying the thing on. It looks like water in the bottle, and you can barely see it coming out when I spray. But it's going to be there. Again, we're just going to go up and down there a couple of times. That's all that needs, just to help seal that material in. Now I'm going to take a nitrile glove, And these gloves are one size smaller than I would have for comfort, so that means that it stays tight on the finger. Sometimes I actually break it on the back of my hand putting it on, but the point I need it on that matters is my forefinger, next finger, middle finger and thumb. So as long as you remember to pierce the top of your tube of Chroma Gilt, you can be able to squeeze out just a small amount, about the size of a grape seed, and roll it around with your fingers, finger and thumb. This is not so we waste material, it's so we just get what looks like a silver fingerprint onto the end of the glove. And then, unusually, instead of doing it by hand as I normally would, as it's such a small area, I'm actually going to do this rotating very slowly for that sort of first coat. It helps me get up to that edge a little more easily. Normally, we put this on with the piece stationary. It just kind of gives me the first layout how that's going to look. So we're going to come back and go over it with the circular motion. So you can apply it. It's not a friction activated product. It's for putting on while work is stationary. But I do find occasionally it's easier, particularly as we come down the design of the chalice to the middle and lower parts of it. They're going to be smaller, and with it rotating slowly, it certainly is a little more helpful. Now, of course, we didn't sound these areas yet because we're going to likely, as I said, smudge over a little bit, but I want to be reasonably careful with how I'm applying this. This would be a 2-coat application, maybe even 3, normally 2 is enough. So it may look a little patchy for the first coat, but the second coat will go on, make it look a lot more shiny and even it up. Drying time is rarely depends on your environment. If it's damp and humid, it's going to take a little longer than if it's a dry, warmer atmosphere. So all those things matter, as you will already know if you spray lacquers and things, that can affect what's going on. So we're getting there, the look of our medieval looking chalice, and I'm not striving for perfection. I could have indexed these perfectly, of course, but a lot of handmade objects back in the day, whilst they were incredibly detailed, wouldn't necessarily have been indexed. And you can see that if you look in museum pieces a lot around the world, that reflects in the maker's work. Okay, Colin, I think that's our first bit done. Over to you for a little bit more turning.
Right, thank you very much, Nick. Okay, so we're going to take this centre right now, we're going to hollow out next, yeah?
Yeah, I believe that's the right place to be.
Yeah, because if we start taking the stem out before we hollow out, then we're going to have problems with security on the lathe. So we'll hollow out. I'm going to start with a 1/4 inch bowl gouge, or 3/8 in American. But we'll start with a nice small gouge, whatever you call it. So we need tailstock out the way.
So nice, that tilt away.
Oh, it just works, doesn't it? And it's so
because you're getting old now, mate, you know, everything's getting heavier.
Well, the amount of times I'm lifting those big heavy tailstocks off the lathe is so grateful for one of these. Okay, so up against the end grain. And before I do anything else, I want to check the chuck. Check the chuck constantly, especially if you go and have a coffee break, anything like that. Things relax, so it's quite important you know where everything is. Small bowl gouge. There's still, even though there's a lot of bulk here, the weak spot is always your thinnest area, so you just got to be mindful of that. I do have a camera here. I'm going to try and work with the camera rather than move it, but if we have to, we have to.
Yep, so that's where the camera is visible in shot. When we put that together, we thought, well, we'll sacrifice the fact that you're seeing one, but it's going to give you an over Colwin shoulder view of this, hopefully. If it doesn't, I'll switch back to the other camera, but we'll try and keep you as much involved as we can.
Now, me and Nick have already spoken about this, and we're going to give a bit of an illusion here that this goblet's thinner than it actually is. So there's a thin lip, isn't it?
Yep.
And then we're slightly getting fatter or thicker as we get down the chalice. That gives the chalice a little bit of weight then, and gives it some substance rather than being very light and fluffy and almost plasticky in its feel. So we want to give some substance there, we'll leave some substance. So just be fairly gentle with your approach. We're a long way from the headstock. We've got a fairly small grip in the chuck. And of course, if you want to, you can go down with a drill bit first. But cut safely, we're going to cut with the bevel of the gouge rubbing. Little bit at a time. I am just going to move that camera a little bit, Nick.
Okay, you're fine. We're looking at the other one at the moment.
Just so I can get in there. I don't want to mess this up because I couldn't quite get the grip right.
It's all looking good.
And we're going to work on the first about an inch at a time, I think, on this one. So bevel rubbing to protect us. And this would be exactly the same if you were hollowing out a box, a goblet, egg cups, bowls even. You're going to tackle it in the same way. Do the first section first, for the first inch or so.
And as you saw there, Colwin was starting near the top but not at the top. And that's why we did that clean up across the face cut beforehand. So there's no whiskers sticking out on the top of that edge because they will grab the tool. Another good use for the fingernail grind there. And we are cutting into end grain, and there's various arguments as to how you would remove wood from the middle of a stake. There, of course, are people who use a pull cut. We could have drilled down to depth to a point and removed some wood first of all, and we could have been using maybe even a carbide tool to get some of that material out. But you can see a shaving coming off that tool there. That's not dust. So it is working efficiently. But the angle of your groin is going to matter in the bottom of there. So you're probably better off looking around 50-55 degree bevel on your tool when you get to the bottom. The vibration you're hearing is also something you're going to encounter when you're coming this far over the tool rest and also this far away from the headstock. All things you have to learn. Don't necessarily fight it, try and adjust your pressure so that you're going to go with the direction of the tool you want to cut with, that those pressures as you've been told will adjust to as it goes down around the corner. Let's just try and get back to the other camera in a minute so we can just see down inside. There we go. Wonderful shot there. Bevel rubbing with the flute pretty much at 2 o'clock. Quite quickly around the corner and swelling down as we get down to the inside of the cut. And that little bit of vibration is always going to be there.
Just that little wiggle at the bottom to cover that centre nib. You do get to a point where you can't really see what's going on, so it's all about feel.
Yeah.
Just going to stop and have a check there. Now we can go a little bit further yet. The sidewall is fairly good, I'm happy with that. It's just taking the depth down a bit more. Coming around nicely at the bottom, just keeping that bevel rubbing. The bevel is your challenging project. And maybe even jumping up a tool size is not a bad idea. With a 3/8 tool like that, oh, you just found the pimple. With a 3/8 gouge, when you go past like the first bend in your finger as overhang, it does start to give you different messages, doesn't it? Definitely does. Right, I think we're there.
Awesome. Looks great.
Yeah, happier with that.
Really gumdrops.
A little bit of abrasive in there, Nick, so 180.
We're only on a fresh one coming up. We're being spoilt here because I have a packet of diamond discs, which is a bit, a bit of a luxury, but it's what's next to me.
And you're going to put a finish on the inside, aren't you? So we want to.
We are. We're going to put. We're actually going to gild the inside later with Egyptian gold, which will really up the look of the whole Chalice interior. So again, we don't want it smooth as a baby's skin. We want to have, again, no more than 400 in there for me personally.
E.
Make a bit of 320.
Just watch yourself, watch your fingers. You still have sharp edges up here, or sharp enough to cut you. So just watch yourself. There we are. And then finally, 400. Now, are you going to do this next, or should I do the stem next, or?
I normally do the little gilding part a little bit near the end.
Right,
So
okay.
I think we'll bring the design down and do our next, turn a little colour as if it's, as if it's really, we've got our colours on these amazing smocks that Axminster have made us. You're a bit more Elvis than I am this morning. But giving it a colour, coming then down into, I don't know, maybe a bowl or a ring or something, not a captive ring, something that we're going to decorate. And that's really what dresses up, makes it more of a chalice and a goblet. But people can argue between the two. But really, the over-decoration makes it more of a chalice than anything else.
Something with size.
Yeah, and because it's going to have that flowing out form, it'll be really stable, so I'll be able to do this more at the end.
Okay.
I can work all in there now.